You're listening to the Business Communicators.
On the issue of social media, Thomas did mention journalism.org and the Pew Research Center. And back in July of 2020, they had a report that said Americans who mainly get their news on social media are less engaged and less knowledgeable. And I don't know if you guys have been following the news out of Australia, but in Australia, and this is sort of something that Thomas alluded to and predicted in past episodes, but there was a news blackout on Facebook. Facebook finally said, all right, look, we're not going to allow any news post at all on social media platform in Australia. And the reason behind this is there was sort of a dispute between print and TV in Australia versus the social media platforms. And I guess it really all goes down to advertising and dollars. When you look at a decade ago, 80% of the advertising market in Australia was controlled by offline media. That number has fallen by half over the last 10 years. And most of that has gone to Facebook and Google in terms of ad revenue. So these media companies that are taking the time, paying employees and putting out these stories, they wanted a little bit of compensation, just to make things right. And Facebook didn't want to negotiate. They said no. And so they blocked all news in Australia. Is this dangerous when it comes to open access to information for the world moving forward? Or is this just sort of an isolated incident, or what is the solution or compromise here?
I don't think, I think they wanted more of like the subscription to where Facebook or Google pays a certain percentage. It goes back to that statement is that if the product's free, then you're the product. And so by them putting their news out there and Google scraping it or Facebook scraping it and posting it in there, there's no competition, to your point, of paying those reporters who are doing quality reporting. Google, on the other hand, has actually turned around and said, hey, we're going to pay some of the Australian broadcasting companies and the other things some fees to let them on there. But Facebook took it a step further. Is here in the United States, we can't even quote news from Australia on Facebook. It's one of those big brothers watching technology. It's like, oh, you mentioned Australia, can't say anything about the news. I do think it's dangerous, but in my heart, I'm siding more with the journalist, because I want fair, balanced, unbiased media reporting that's accurate and not first. And so I would like them to pay. I don't know if it's $1 million. I don't know if it's $1. I don't know what the specs of it are, but I'm for Australia saying, you need to pay for us to be able to run this quality stuff. That's my take on it. What's your thought, Dan, being from Canada?
My background is from the world of broadcasting. So technology firm, media, 100%. I am in the space of what's best for the people. And I mean this from the sense of, without effective investigative journalism, good journalism, storytelling, those stories being told within communities nationally, holding power to account, etc. Unless that has a place to be told, I'm always going to say that people are going to lose out. It's a case of choice. The citizen can still go and buy the newspaper. The citizen can still go to the individual website of the media outlet. How much are they driven to go and do that? That is the question. They've got very used to a friend posting an article from the ABC or Channel 9 or Channel 10 or Channel 7 or whoever, and suddenly that has stopped. So it's the virile nature of a story being posted by a friend that then they comment on, add their opinion, and that discourse that goes with it that is suddenly stopped. My friend, who is an IT guy, he sent out a Bitly link with a link to a news article, and Facebook didn't block the Bitly link because they don't scan links. Good and bad, you might say, in that sense. Consumers still have a choice of where to consume their news. However, it's very easy once you get into the Facebook ecosystem or a platform's ecosystem to just scroll, comment, read, scroll, and yes, link off to that news outlet. There is a responsibility by big tech corporations to not negatively, I'm not going to say that their job is to positively affect society. Some might say that, but it's their job not to negatively affect a society. When there is so much misinformation, when there are lookalike articles being shared by people, and you cut off the legs of an authentic media outlet to tell that story so that people can look at both of these and evaluate for themselves, well, that's a major media outlet. My trust is with them. I'm fine. That's not good for society. That's negative. Sure, I can see the argument. I've followed the Australian argument for a long time because in the UK, we've been saying to platforms, one, you need to pay taxes in market. Two, you need to compensate creators for the work that they do. Why will you pay someone who's in your partnership program for video plays, but you won't pay someone who writes an article and has producers and researchers and rights people working on articles? We can't have a platform negatively affecting society. So I think that it's brinksmanship in Australia. I think they will come to a deal. It will be fairly quickly. And I think that Facebook, I don't know, I'm not on the inside of the organization, but if it was the best thing for that corporation, the best thing for them to do is to get into those negotiations. It just seems like a bit of strongman at the moment. Get round the table, get an agreement done, agree to pay X amount, and maybe it's reviewed every 5 years or whatever it is. But at the point where, if we go back to Zuck, when he was saying, Facebook had no influence on the 2016 election. Well, if you chopped off every political post at that point on your platform and only kept it to kittens and puppies, well, yeah, you wouldn't have had any influence. What's on the platform matters. What people say matters. So by putting a block in, that is a negative thing. And I'm intrigued to hear what you guys think from the point of view of, what if this happened in America? Would there be an uproar, or would people just carry on and go, well, we didn't miss it anyway?
Well, it's interesting because I think the demographics for Facebook in the United States are starting to trend more older. I think the younger generation, they're more TikTok, they're more Instagram. That's where they get their news. I still think people get their news from social media, but the younger generations, I'm not sure it's quite Facebook. But as you mentioned with the 2016 election, Facebook played an important role. There's a reason why Donald Trump, instead of spending all this money on TV ads, spent so much money on digital ads that were on Facebook. There's a reason why the Lincoln Project, we spoke last week about, spent so much on digital ads rather than TV ads. It's because that's where you reach people, and it's much cheaper and effective to do so. I am curious to see if Facebook, who has tried to reach out into this Facebook news thing in the past few years, but they've never really gotten it off the ground, I'm curious if they try to adapt the Apple News approach, right? Where you get certain stories for free and they pay, for access to the Washington Post, New York Times. And then if you want the premium access, you get that. I'm curious if Facebook decides to go that route. I think that could be interesting to follow. I did want to read this quote real quick from Scott Morrison, who's the Prime Minister. He actually wrote on Facebook that the company's actions to, quote, unfriend Australia would, quote, only confirm the concerns that is increasing the number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies who think they are bigger than governments and the rules should not apply to them. I don't know that I necessarily agree that Facebooks are bigger than governments, or tech is bigger than government, and I don't think this is a government issue. I think this is an issue between B2B. Thomas, am I wrong? I think this is a B2B issue and not a business to government issue.
Yes and no, because the pen is mightier than the sword. In this case, the computer's mightier than the sword. We rely on the media, the FTC here in the United States, so that in times of crisis, as we're talking, we have the ability to broadcast those messages reliably, whether it's traditional radio, whether it's this, whether it's that. The media's rules and laws here in the States were written back in, 96? So they're a little antiquated and dated. And again, I fear that them taking Facebook off of it is going to open it up more for the conspiracy theorists and drive that divide anymore. Because all it takes is one person to take one little tidbit of truth and then just to run wild with it. And there will be no background. You know, growing up in the United States, being a citizen, believing in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, it's really hard for me to sit there and say that I'm coming from that school of thought that our professional organizations, PRSA, AMA, and our title sponsor, IABC, should come together and actually figure out some sort of universal certifications, licensing codes, so that when we post something about the news, it's moved to the top of the food chain. When we combat those fake things, it's moved to the top of the food chain, saying this is an actual person who's taken studies, who has ethics, who can lose their license and their ability to do that. But I think the Prime Minister said it best, because here in the States, there's a lot of states right now that are going after ad revenue for Facebook because it is a good and service that is in their state. And when millions and billions of dollars that could be going to build infrastructure, dangerous word there, should be there. And I do think Facebook and all the social media, you read about India and Twitter, they're at war with each other right now about the blocking of certain ones and letting so
the agricultural issues.
Is that at some point in time there has to be a mutual understanding, and without that mutual understanding, and whether it's the government playing the mediator or whether it's the media outlets and the social media coming together naturally, which I don't think will, because they're all about money. Not all about money, but ad revenue is definitely their driving force on a lot of it. So I'm really hoping that they work it out. Here in the United States, we work it out. Here in England, they work it out, because I remember hearing about that. Because, by the way, the BBC is an amazing public broadcast there. The Canadian broadcast system, that's pretty entertaining as well, for certain things. It's just they've got to find a common ground, and they have to work on it, not just for business and not just for communications, but for the good of society.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators.